Hello and welcome back to Bookish. I wanted to do an update, a quick wrap up on my Victober so far. So I've been doing two things for Victober. I've been listening to the audiobook of Bleak House at work mainly, and a little bit in the car on my way to and from work. I haven't got quite as far in that as I wanted to. I'm still only on about chapter 26, and if you've ever seen a printed copy of Bleak House, it's a really big book, and I think I still have about 18 hours of listening to do. That's looking a little iffy. I'm gonna have to get really serious about finishing that. But so far, I'm enjoying it. I have, I think, probably what are our usual issues with Dickens. A little bit long-winded and maybe cut down on the characters, the number of characters a little bit, and don't chase so many plot lines and rabbits, and maybe we don't have to fully develop every minor character. To the modern reader, I think, or maybe it's just me, a lot of times all that extra level of detail and characterization in Dickens can be a bit tedious. So in addition to listening to the audiobook of Bleak House, I also chose to read The Tenant of Wildfeld Hall by Anne Bronte, and this book I really, really liked. I liked it more at the beginning than I did later on in the book, but I really was impressed. If you've watched my channel, or maybe I've just only put in a comment, I can't remember. I had to read Jane Eyre and Wuthering Heights for school, and maybe it was because it was required reading and I was young. I really didn't enjoy those books, but I like this, so maybe Anne Bronte is my Bronte sister. I think the book is really remarkable for Anne Bronte's ability to write from the perspective of two very different characters. The first is Gilbert Markham, who is writing letters to a friend of his who really isn't a character in the book at all, but he's writing letters to a friend of his essentially about a woman he met, who is in fact the tenant of Wildfeld Hall. In the first part of the book, she's known as Helen Graham, and she comes to Wildfeld Hall, in the area where Gilbert Markham lives, under incredibly mysterious circumstances. There are all kinds of rumors, many of them not very nice, about her, and Gilbert naturally falls in love with her because she's exceedingly beautiful. So the first part of the book is about Gilbert's infatuation and him falling in love with Helen Graham. And then the book shifts as he expresses his love for her, and she essentially pulls away for reasons that are not clear. He comes into possession of a part of her diary in which he learns more about her. And so the second part of the book is actually told from Helen Graham's perspective, who's actually Helen Huntington, who is a married woman in an incredibly unhappy marriage. And there's the most of the middle part of the book is a story about her unfortunate marriage, how she came to be married, and how unhappy she is, and really what an awful person her husband is. And I have to tell you that if one of the signs of a good book is the ability to incite hate of a character, I hate Helen Huntington's husband, Arthur Huntington. He is a despicable person, and one of the most selfish and I think malicious characters, really, that I've ever read about. Okay, so what I found most remarkable about The Tenant of Wildfeld Hall was Anne Bronte's ability to write from two different perspectives. The perspective of a man, Gilbert Markham, and to portray him, I think, in a really almost comically vain, pretentious way. He definitely thinks he is the catch of the county at the beginning of the book. And his love for Helen changes him and definitely makes him into a better person. And then to write from the perspective of Helen Graham, Helen Huntington, later as the, really put upon and, persecuted wife of a terrible man whom she married against her own logic and really against her family's recommendations, and to see her suffer and to make her the hero of the story, I think, by how she conducts herself in her marriage, but also then when you look back at the way she's portrayed through Gilbert's eyes at the first part of the book, or in the first part of the book, makes her all the more remarkable. And I won't give away the ending, of the book, but there are, it's a satisfying ending to the book, even though it doesn't seem like it's gonna end up there. There are a couple other things I just thought were really good in the book, and so I was just going to read one thing, which I thought was a really great description. This was about a character in the book called Mr. Lawrence. Mr. Lawrence was like a new garment, all neat and trim to look at, but so tight in the elbows that you would fear to split the seams by unrestricted motion of your arms, and so smooth and fine in surface that you scruple to expose it to a single drop of rain. I love that description of Mr. Lawrence, and she has a real knack for using physical description to characterize her characters, and I think Mr. Lawrence is aptly described there. Also, in reading the book, I thought to myself, in thinking about this in modern times, it seems like the beginning of the book that Helen Huntington definitely friend zones Gilbert Markham, and that he believes at some point that the way to her heart is to become her good friend and her confidant. And I just thought, well, that's an incredibly modern kind of idea to have in the book. And then I thought, well, maybe it's not modern. Maybe that's what's always maybe men have always thought the way to, for lack of a better term, get the girl was to be her friend or to befriend her first. But I really found that kind of interesting because it appears as though Gilbert is going to be friend zoned really hard. The beginning of the book and the character of Helen is so strong and such a really remarkably virtuous person who has the strength to do things that women of her time period didn't do. It was a little bit disappointing, I think, to see how that all ended and how it turned into what I think is a fairly traditional romantic ending. But having said all that, I really enjoyed The Tenant of Wildfield Hall, and I believe Agnes Grey is the other novel by Anne Bronte, and one day I'm definitely going to pick that up and read it because I enjoyed this book. So my next book I think I'm going to pick up or choose from my Victober TBR is Cranford by Elizabeth Gaskell. But before I do that, I think I'm going to read some of my Thomas Hardy poems. Maybe I'll read some of those tonight because I promised myself I was going to try to get into Thomas Hardy by reading the poetry. Anyway, let me know what you think. Let me know if you've read The Tenant of Wildfield Hall, and I look forward to hearing from you down in the comments. Thanks for watching.